Salvatore Moreau is, without a doubt, the lord we know least about. Which is kind of sad considering how thoroughly damaged he is, and I am just going to give you a heads up about this now. If you expect me to feel sorry for Moreau, that's not going to happen. I pity him, sure, but hold your judgment and sympathy for Moreau until the end as I walk you through his life and death in Resident Evil Village. If you like these lore videos, please do give the video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below who you'd like me to do next, as I really love writing them, so yeah, get on it. So, here's the story of Salvatore Moreau, and beware, there are plenty of spoilers in this one. Here we go. The reason we don't know a lot about Moreau, I'll admit, is kind of sad, as no one cared enough about him to write anything about him, include him in diary entries, or document his time in the village. Not even Moreau himself. Donna Beneviento had her gardener to give us insight into her time before and after being adopted by Miranda. Lady Domitresque had her maids and servants to recount what it was like living in Castle Domitresque, and Heisenberg kept a diary filled with his loathing of Miranda. But Moreau? Like in Resident Evil Village, Moreau was apparently disliked or simply not cared about by the villagers and lords to the extent that no one bothered to even mention him in passing in their diaries. Don't worry though, I found a bunch of information and hints about Moreau's past anyway, so let's begin. Moreau probably spent his childhood in the fishing settlement on the border of the village. Upon his arms are a nautical anchor tattoo, usually gotten by sailors or fishermen, and a tattoo of the word mum on a jellyfish instead of the traditional heart. This just shows Moreau's love of the ocean, that he'd rather have an undersea creature attached to his love for his mother rather than a heart. Or, if you look at it another way, it could be that he considers the sea to symbolically be his mother. Personally, I'm more inclined to believe the former, as Moreau is, well, he's not like other people in terms of how he thinks of mothers. Having gotten this tattoo before he met Miranda, because come on, who's going to tattoo him once he's mutated and hides under this huge coat, it implies that Moreau has always been very attached to the central maternal figure in his life, whether that's his biological mother or Miranda, who occupies that role once he accepts the Cadou. Okay, Moreau's childhood was, like Donna's, not too happy. Hear me out here. In the destroyed fishing village near the power station where you buy stuff from the Duke is a sign that reads Moreau's Clinic. It's obviously been there a while, is in a typeface rather than being scrawled like Moreau's lab sign, and has icons next to it of various medicine bottles and whatnot. Far from being a fisherman, I believe the Moreau family were actually doctors, or at least one of Moreau's parents were, serving the entire village from the fishing port where most illnesses would presumably arise from being close to waterborne bacteria, gutting fish, and cutting yourself, that kind of thing. With a professional sign like that erected and signposted so clearly, I think the Moreaus were quite respected in the village, but their son Salvatore didn't quite live up to their expectations. By all indications, like Moreau's nautical tattoos and his amateurish experiments after meeting Miranda, Moreau simply wasn't cut out for being a doctor. Yeah, this is all theories and headcanon on my part, but bear with me. Moreau's whole thing in Resident Evil Village is fearing that he's not good enough for Miranda, his mother, constantly seeking out her approval and moaning about being left out by the other lords. Clearly, something happened in Moreau's past to make him feel like love between mother and son is conditional, that he has to be successful to a certain degree to be shown love by his mother. What if Moreau wasn't good enough to be a doctor, so became a fisherman instead, having been surrounded by them all of his life after living in the fishing settlement? Being a fisherman when your parents expect you to be a doctor can't have been easy for him, and it's entirely possible that his mother treated him none too kindly, with contempt or something, because he couldn't cut it as a physician. Or, and this is the alternate theory I prefer, Moreau projected his shame and insecurity about not being smart enough to be a doctor onto his mother's love for him, and became convinced that he wasn't getting the love he desired because he wasn't a doctor. Either way, I think not being a doctor and therefore not working at the Moreau clinic was the start of Moreau's low self-worth. After being on the sea for a while, he got tattoos of the anchor and another one of a jellyfish proclaiming his love for his mother. Who knows, a jellyfish might be the most beautiful thing to Moreau, so associating it with his mother might have been his form of a compliment. It's likely that if his relationship with his parents was poor, he went willingly with Miranda to be experimented upon, as he might have seen a potential maternal figure in her, though it's entirely possible his parents were dead by then. Moreau got it all wrong though. Miranda was not the mother figure he thought she'd be. Rather than being loving, she was actually pretty shady in her assessment of him after the Cadou procedure, labelling his brain function as being surprisingly low. Considering his uncontrollable mutations and low affinity with the Cadou, he was probably her least favourite of the four lords. And this is why a lot of people feel sorry for Moreau. All he wants is to be the favourite child for once, but that simply was not happening. Being implanted with the Cadou caused intense mutations in Moreau, unlike the other lords. His brain spread over his back, forcing his posture into something like an elderly crone thanks to the Cadou being implanted in his neck. Being unfettered by human anatomy, like being inserted close to the bones or organs that would restrict its growth, courtesy of there simply not being enough space for it to grow, the Cadou thrived. Clearly ashamed of his body, Moreau hid his enlarged and exposed brain with a stitched and customised coat. Originally, that mass on his back was going to be the body of a woman he was in love with before meeting Miranda, who he absorbed into his body. That idea was scrapped in the end, but I think it tells you a lot about Moreau. To him, utterly consuming the thing he loves and being bound to it for eternity, unable to be abandoned by the object of his affections, is his ideal scenario, I reckon. Shows that he doesn't really understand what love is though, as it is not a possession thing. Anyway, I got off track there. Following her gift of the Cadou, Miranda gave Moreau a mountain upon which to conduct his own experiments. Eager to finally become a doctor like the rest of his family, in my opinion, Moreau wasted no time in experimenting upon villagers and even got himself an assistant. On Miranda's side, she probably kept him around so she could track how his mutation would progress, as that is the kind of cold thing she'd do. Somewhere along the line, Moreau gained the ability to produce and control these big, globby masses, which are enzymes, apparently. Isolating himself in the fishing village, like Donna, Moreau doesn't voyage into the village to abduct people for his experiments, noting in his diary that Miranda was the one to bring him subjects. This small act of probably convenience on Miranda's part, or she simply knew he didn't have the skill to obtain victims for himself, was mistaken for affection by Moreau and only made him more eager to make her proud. When he's not experimenting upon poor villagers, Moreau enjoys long walks on the beach, a Pinot Grigio and... Nah, I'm kidding. He watches romance movies in his shack and eats cheese. Which, yeah, is very relatable if you replace romance movies with true crime, but this does show that Moreau craves that kind of escapism. He longs for a life and bond with someone that he simply does not have. And yeah, I'm starting to feel a bit sorry for him now. Let's get rid of some of that pity though, because I'd like to point out that Moreau wears a crown made of the bones of villagers he's had a hand in killing. You heard me right. Concept art notes point out this fact, meaning that Moreau dissected villagers, cleaned their bones, then attached them to a fishing rope and put them on his head. Just wanted to spell out what an involved process that is and show that Moreau is not as sympathetic as people seem to think he is, because that is a messed up thing to do. Wearing a crown also shows how Moreau sees himself or wants to be perceived. As a king, someone above others, as someone with prestige and fame. Not likely to happen if you keep chopping up villagers though, is it, Salvatore? Anyway, another thing Moreau figured out how to do was transform at will into a large fish monster. Gradually destroying the village he once lived in, he used this form to slip into the reservoir and hunt fishermen, destroying their boats and being a general menace. Realistically speaking, this is probably the strongest and most confident he had ever felt when he was scaring people in his mutant form, as no one stood a chance against him because, regardless of what he was usually like, Moreau was undoubtedly really powerful like this. It's also particularly ironic that his fish form is covered in eyes, but he doesn't like people looking at him. Back in his lab, working away with his assistant, Moreau's true nature comes through. He doesn't even write down the names of the villagers he's experimenting upon, or note the name of his assistant, because I really think he got tunnel vision about proving himself to Miranda, and in the process, didn't care about literally anyone else. To him, these people were just there to facilitate his attempts to impress Miranda. Tools, not even worth bothering about when they die. Chillingly, Moreau's attitude towards using the villagers for his own gain is just as heartless as Miranda, who was using Moreau in turn. All that amateur surgery and trying to become the doctor he felt pressured to be resulted in more lichens and, also, the creation of the deadly Vârcolac. He created these monstrosities, which thumbs up for terrifying me with those things. I mean, look at me doing a double take of one here, and yes, I very bravely hid in a shack while I waited for it to come into view again. I mean, can you blame me? But Moreau resents having to feed it, like a child with a new pet that they have to take care of. Look in his diary and you'll see some similar, basic childish writing with poor spelling. However, while Moreau might not be particularly literate, he's definitely manipulative, which I'll get onto later. Before the arrival of Mr. Winters, Moreau started to lose control of the ability to transform into a giant fish monster, as it started to happen unpredictably as his mutation grew beyond any semblance of control. By now, the fishing village had been totally ravaged by his destruction in fish form, devoid of any inhabitants whatsoever and partially flooded, which was maybe done by Moreau himself to give him more space to swim around in. If that's the only time he feels powerful, it makes sense that he'd want to expand the watery areas, as there, he knows he's unbeatable. Enter Ethan. Kidnapping Rose, crystallizing her and splitting her into 4 parts was the precipitating factor in Moreau realizing that now more than ever, he had to impress Miranda. Along with Heisenberg, he was the only Lord to twig that once Miranda had Eva back, she wouldn't need any of them anymore and would likely get rid of the 4 Lords sharpish. Moreau becoming aware of this fact shows that he is cognizant of family dynamics, especially when it comes to one sibling being preferred over the other. This potentially indicates that in the past, Moreau might have gone through this experience before, and that does track. I don't know much about his interactions with the other Lords before Ethan's arrival, but I don't think he was particularly close to any of them. Sad as it is, they almost definitely avoided him because of his grotesque mutations, and I doubt Domitrescu and Heisenberg would have wanted to mess up their outfits in his swamp. But Moreau desperately wants to be liked by them. During the trial, he laughs at Heisenberg's jokes, stands beside him, and copies Angie when she has a peer at Ethan. Writing in his diary, Moreau reveals that Heisenberg was the one who comforted him, or reassured is probably a better word, as I doubt Heisenberg liked him enough to worry about his feelings, when Moreau didn't think he'd be given a rose flask, saying that no one likes me, which is why I thought they would leave me out again, but Heisenberg said that was why we each get a rose. The ceremony cannot happen without us all there. Moreau can also be quite manipulative when he wants to be. He knew it was a good idea to keep talking to Ethan to give him time to imprison Rose's father in his domain, using tears and trying to elicit sympathy from Ethan to delay him getting the hell out of there. The next time Ethan meets Moreau, our fish boy is not doing too good. Spluttering that may indicate that he's been trying to repress the Cadou inside of him and stick to the more humanoid form. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't think he stands a chance of Miranda loving him if he gets stuck in his fish form. This is where I do pity him, as he clearly knows it's not fair that the other Lords got better mutations and abilities that impressed Miranda, while he's stuck with this monstrous form that he has no control over, and he doesn't know why his mutation is different. Having said that, I'm going to go ahead and say Moreau's boss fight is the hardest in the game. He's a force to be reckoned with in his fish form and has 2 sections. This bit on the water and in the drained fishing village. Raining down acid is kind of a pathetic fallacy too, as tears, rain, sadness, they're all symbolically linked. It's smart too. Moreau makes a note of the weather in his diary, and he's the only boss to use powerful area of effect attacks like that, as far as I can recall. Despite his mutations causing him pain and trouble, he knows how to use his acid and enzymes best. Block in Ethan with the enzyme walls, then uses acid to dissolve him to death. Smart. Moreau's death is pitiful. His final thought is of Miranda loving him and wanting her to come and save him, but that was never gonna happen. He was just a useful roadblock to slow Ethan down. So, people feel sorry for Moreau because all he wanted was to be loved by his mother, but in the process, he hurt a lot of people. I understand that, but I don't feel sorry for him myself. I feel more sorry for Donna, to be honest. Moreau took people from the village and experimented upon them, didn't care enough about his assistant to even note down their name, and, I think, destroyed an entire region of the village so he could feel powerful. He just kinda sucks in my eyes, plus this section annoyed the hell out of me. So, there you go. That's Salvatore Moreau from Resident Evil Village's Story Explained. Do you want to see me do Heisenberg or the Duke next? And do you feel sorry for Moreau at all? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, thanks very much, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Eurogamer, as we have a new video out every single day. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go, so remember to stay hydrated, folks, and I'll see you next time.